So this lesson is talking about the geometric properties. If you look at page 10 in your book, you will see these properties. So go ahead and put the title and write down today's date as you normally do in your notes. After that, you don't have to write any of this next set of information down because it is available in your book. So let's take a look at this information. These are vertical angles. If you have two lines that intersect, the place where they intersect, you see that you are forming a couple of angles here. And you have some information about these angles that are on opposite sides. They are going to have equal measures or congruent. So these angles are going to be congruent. So if I told you that this was a 50-degree angle, then you could say that this one opposite it would be 50 degrees as well. You could also find out the measure of the other angle by knowing the fact that this is 180 degrees. It's a line. If you're just looking at this one side of the angle. So you could take 180 minus 50, and that would mean this angle is 130, which means that the other angle over here would be 130 as well. So those are your vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. The next geometry idea that we're looking at here, and this is on page 11 if you're looking in the book. You can look at the virtual book or the paper book if you have one. Okay, so we have two different things. We have alternate interior angles. Actually, there's four things here. Alternate exterior angles, interior angles on the same side, and then corresponding. So if you're talking about interior angles, I had a teacher show me this once. She said, think of the parallel lines like a river. So if you were thinking about a river, the parallel lines would be the banks of the river. Everything in the river would be considered interior. So that would be your interior angles. Everything outside of the banks of the river, outside of those parallel lines, are considered exterior angles. Okay, now why does that help you? Well, if you're looking at these angles, if they are inside the river, inside those parallel lines, and they're alternating like this, or even these two smaller ones here, then they are equal, they're congruent. If you have angles that are alternating on the outside of the parallel lines, out here or here, those are also equal, and that's called alternate exterior angles, and they alternate on the outside. And when I say alternate, I mean they're going back and forth across this transversal. So these are all parallel lines, and that red line is called the transversal. Another set of lines that you may see, or angles, are angles that are on the same side of the transversal. So these are not going back and forth. Instead, they're just on the same side there. Those are interior, same side. They're going to equal 180, so they'll be supplementary. Again, this whole chart is on page 11. And then the last type of angles that you may see are corresponding. Corresponding are angles that sit in the same position. And when they sit in the same position, they are congruent or equal. So 2 and 6, this angle here, this angle there, and so on. So there's lots of different angle relationships that you're going to be looking at. So pause the video if needed and copy this picture into your notes. A couple things I want you to notice is that the 9x plus 9 is representing angle 2, and the 7x minus 5 represents angle 3. So go ahead and copy that down, pause if needed. I'm going to calculate the value of all of the marked angles in this example. So in order to do that, I have to decide what type of angle relationship that I have here. These are both interior angles. They're inside those parallel lines. And also, you'll see that they are not alternating across the transversal. They're on the same side. So according to my geometry properties, if they're on the same side of the transversal and they're interior, they're going to add up to 180. So I'm going to go ahead and take the two angles and I'm going to add them up to 180. The next thing that you want to do is you want to combine your like terms. So go ahead and combine your like terms. and go ahead and solve for x. When you find the x value, remember you're not finished. You have to then plug it back in up above. So you can certainly use a calculator here. If you want to calculate these in your brain, that's fine as well. So I found this was 99 plus 9, and I got 108. This other one works out to be 77 minus 5 is 72. You can check your answer by adding them, and they should add up to 180. So those are those two angles here. This question, though, was also asking to find all four of the angles. These are vertical. So if this one is 108, which is what we just found, then this would also be 108. Okay, now these are alternate exterior angles. You also have corresponding angles. You also could say 180 minus 72, and regardless, this one is 108 as well. So number 4. So same thing, go ahead and pause the video and copy this down. This is a triangle. A triangle adds up to 180 degrees. So if you know some information about the angles, what you could do is you could add them up and set them equal to 180. So go ahead and do that now. So add them up in any order and let them equal 180. I'm just going to go in order that I see it. It doesn't really matter as long as you have all three of the angles represented. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to combine my like terms. So x plus x, that's 2x, minus 3. 2 minus 3 is negative 1x or negative x. That takes care of the x's. 20 plus 210 is 230. And I have the 180 that I'm going to bring down. Go ahead and solve it. If at any point you need to pause, just pause your own video. Okay, and you don't want to leave it negative, so I'm going to divide by negative 1. So x equals 50. Okay, now remember, this isn't the complete finished answer. You need to then plug it back in. So plug it back in up here for each one of these angles. So this first one's pretty straightforward. It's just 50. This next one is 50 plus 20, which is 70. And again, these are really these angles in here. So this is 70, this is 50. Okay, and then the other one, if you're using an actual calculator, you can just type it in order. If you're using, like, say, your phone, you have to multiply 3 times 50 first, which is 150, and then subtract. If you want to check this answer, you would just add them all up, and they should add up to 180 degrees. Here's our last picture example. I just want to make sure you know where these angles are going. So again, copy this down. This is talking about this measurement right here, and it's 9x plus 12. This angle up at the top is 6x plus 3, the remote angle. And then this angle right here is 4x minus 3. This property is a geometry property that says, so make sure you're copying this down, the sum of the measure of the remote interior angles, remote means that they're away from this one, the ones that are away, the sum of the measure of the remote interior angles is equal to this exterior angle. So according to that property, again, the sum of the measure of these two angles will equal this outside angle. So that's how I'm going to set it up. It doesn't matter which of the two interior angles you start with, as long as you're adding them together. And according to the property, that's going to equal this one on the outside. Just like every other question, we're going to combine our like terms. So go ahead and combine up your like terms. I'm adding the x's first. and you'll notice that a negative 3 plus 3 is 0, so that just crosses out. Okay, now you can either move the 10x or the 9x, but since 9, I want to get the x's to one side, and 9 is smaller, so I'm going to subtract 9x. So that's going to give me x equals 12. Okay, now don't forget the most important part, plugging it back in. So you're going to go ahead and plug it back in for each angle. So go ahead and do the calculations on your calculator. So unlike the other questions, this one's not going to add up to 180. Instead, the definition said that these two angles here, the 45 and the 75, will equal this exterior. And if you add them, 45 plus 75 does equal 120, so it works. So the last type of example that you're going to look at is finding the measure of a triangle, the third angle of a triangle, given two angles. So remember, a triangle adds up to 180 degrees. So start with that. And what you can do is subtract one angle at a time. So if they give you two angles and you need to find the third, you can simply just subtract one angle at a time. So I'm going to line it up just like we would have with any other example, and I'm going to put in the missing minutes. Okay, so just like you had before, if you're trying to subtract 50 from nothing, you're going to have to borrow. So if you take out a degree, that leaves you with 179, and that adds in the 60 minutes. Go ahead and subtract your columns to figure out how many minutes and seconds you have. Sorry, degrees and minutes that you have. Now, normally if you were just calculating like a supplement of an angle, you would be finished. But this example is asking you to find the measure of the third angle of a triangle. So if I have 180 and I subtract out one angle already, in order to find out what's left, I'm going to also have to subtract out this other angle. So you could technically put this 4138 right below this other one, but just to make this a little bit neater looking, I'm going to write this answer off to the side because I'm going to be doing this subtraction problem here one more time. So I'm subtracting the 41 degrees, the 38 minutes. You'll notice that if you try to subtract 10 minus 38, you end up with a negative number. So what you're going to have to do again is borrow. So go ahead and borrow the degree. 43 is now going to be 1 degree less, so 42. And you're going to add the 60 minutes that you just gained back over here. But there's already something there. So you're going to add the 10 and the 60, which gives you now 70. So go ahead and subtract. So you'll have 32 minutes and only 1 degree. And these are your problems from this section.